So we had a long weekend, thanks to respect for the aged day. And so Katie, my Jet girlfriend, now Jet wife, and I hopped in my car and we drove out to the western part of Kochi in the hopes of witnessing what was rumored to be a spectacular fire festival. This is the Nakamura Kure Hachimangu Shuki Taisai, the big autumn festival. The festival is scheduled to start at midnight. It's one of those really late ones. And we pulled into Nakamura about 11 p.m. expecting some crowds. We wanted to see food stalls. We thought, we'd see a festival, but there was nothing. The town was completely deserted. So we parked the car and we walked over to the shrine in the hopes of finding out some more information, but nothing. It was dark. There was nobody there. So we walked along the streets of town, just looking around, trying to find something. And, here and there along the road, we saw some kind of surly looking youths watching us silently as we walked by. We decided eventually to follow this group of little boys, hoping they were going towards the festival. So we were going to follow them. But then a kid rode by us on his bicycle. He stopped and he offered his services as a Japanese samurai to dispatch those evil boys because they would kill us if we even talked to them. So we turned around and went back to the shrine. At that time, I thought, okay, let's call our friend who told us about this festival and see if we can find out like what's going on. We know we've got the right date. So we call her up and she said, oh yeah, the festival actually starts up the road. It's in a different village called Ono, and then they, progress down to Nakatosa. I say, okay, well, great. So we hop back in the car and we start driving up the coast and then up into the mountains. So the road is twisting and turning, and I'm starting to feel like we're getting lost. Like, I don't know if we're going to find this, but we round this one corner and in the distance, we can see these bright lights. So the road is closed off heading in that direction. So we get out of the car and we start walking. And as we're walking, we're passing through these rice fields, and there's these little paper lanterns lining the path. And they have illustrations done by, I'm guessing, the local elementary school kids. So it's different characters from Pokemon and Kirby and other like video game characters. And we're getting closer and the lights are getting brighter. And we can see there's this big bonfire on the hill. And we're hearing sounds of chanting and beating drums. So we're getting closer and the procession, the parade is starting to form. And in the front, there's these two men and they're holding these giant torches. Lit torches as tall as they were. And behind them are some priests, some other guys playing like little drums. And this one who we assume was the main priest, he's holding basically a little tree with the little, the paper streamers you might see at a Shinto festival hanging off the tree. And so Katie and I have our cameras out, we're taking pictures, we're trying to capture the whole scene. And then the parade starts to move. They start walking. And then we notice that the bonfire has risen up and it's starting to come towards us too. So it's not a bonfire, it's a giant torch. It's massive. It's 3 times the size as a normal person, as thick around as a tree trunk. And the bottom was supported by probably a dozen men carrying it, wearing blue hoppy coats. They had, hachimaki on, they had their onsen towels on their heads to protect them from the sparks that are dropping off this torch onto them. I don't envy them the burden that they're carrying, but the people I really felt bad for were the, I think, 14 or so guys walking behind the torch, each of them carrying this bamboo pole they're using to prop up the burning end of the torch. So they're walking along, balancing the torch on their bamboo poles, and it's dropping chunks of flaming chaff onto the street. And they're jumping and dodging. And each time they do that, the torch kind of shakes a little bit. And you worry that, it's going to fall off and maybe land in the rice fields on either side, set the town on fire. Every once in a while, they stop to take a break. The thing is really heavy. I've looked it up recently. It probably weighs about a ton, and a metric ton. And so they set it down, they anchor the bamboo poles into the dirt, and they take a break, have some drinks. And during one of these breaks, we said, okay, let's go back into town and, set up there, try to take some good pictures as the torch comes to town. So in our absence, Nakamoto has now transformed from a ghost town into this riot of drunk young men, wildly beating drums and just drinking. Some of them had gone far too far, glazed eyes, stumbling, falling over. And the drumming speeds up and the men are chanting and they're yelling, and the torch finally makes its way into town. And I pick up their drums and they start following the torch. So we're following them along through the streets as well, pounding away, shouting, chanting. And then we reach this intersection where they stop. And the torch continues on, but the young men with their drums, and it's quite crowded at this point, they stop and they kind of spread out. And they split into two groups, shouting jeers and taunts across this kind of no man's land. And the drumming is at this frenzied pace. And they face off, and then they charge at each other, and they're smashing the drums against one another. These are these big daiko, and they're hitting again and again and shouting and screaming and cursing in Japanese. And then they just stop and continue moving down the street. So during this drum battle, they had taken the giant torch down to the beach to let it die down a little bit before the grand finale. And the grand finale is when they take the torch and they put it into the shrine, still burning, and then cast it out onto the stones of the walkway, where it shatters apart, sending embers flying everywhere. And people rush in to grab those burning embers, or hopefully not burning embers, as a talisman against sickness, a talisman for safety of your family. At least that's what I've heard, because at that point it was probably 4 a.m. The crowds are too big, the people were too wild, and we were just exhausted. So Katie and I headed out of there and found a place to camp for the night.